walking the serpentine path, following the footsteps of the ancestors, walking the serpentine path, making our way back home. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho. Following the serpentine path. Life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Claire Wowdy Yassid, and I will be your guide on the serpentine path of life. I'm a songkeeper, plant walker, storyteller, word weaver, artesana, visual and performance artist, daughter, granddaughter, sister, lover, student, and friend, among many, many, many other things. I've spent my life traversing through altered states of consciousness and find it fascinating to explore all the ways in which our modern culture has become almost entirely severed from our innate instinctual and intuitive ability to see beyond the veil of so called reality. In this podcast, I will be sharing my own personal stories and insights regarding all things related to plant medicine, the birth, death, rebirth cycle, ancestral reconnection, intergenerational healing, womb sovereignty and bodily autonomy, dream work, rites of passage and initiations, time travel, shape-shifting, dimension hopping, and the reclamation of our collective earth-based practices, all of which I consider to be portals into altered states of consciousness. I thank you with my deepest respect and humility for taking the time to open your ears, your minds, and your hearts to what it is that I have to share. The telling of one's story is an intimate and vulnerable experience. It is also, in my opinion, one of the most powerful, illuminating, liberating, and healing medicines that a person can offer to the world. Hearing the cadence in a storyteller's voice, their laughter, their tears, their tone, their pauses, their pain, their joy, their curiosity, and their heart's song is something that can only truly be experienced by way of oral storytelling. Thus, in honoring the storytelling lineages of all of our ancestors, I offer my story to you now. In another world, another time, another dream, we're all sitting together in front of a big fire, passing our visions across the flames and receiving the medicine in our hearts. So, again, welcome to the serpentine path where the ancestors have called us back to. Let's start at the end and find our way back home together. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second part of my story of healing from childhood sexual abuse. So, if you haven't taken the time to listen to the first part of the episode, I would suggest pausing here and going back, because otherwise, I think you'll probably be pretty lost with where I'm at in my story. And again, I'm gonna just say that this is a very heavy conversation. So if it's not something that you feel comfortable with, supported in, resourced enough to handle, please just take care of yourself. So in order to move forward, I need to go back a little bit. So I met my partner, Vincent, in September of 2021. Yeah, September 2021. And we officially started dating at the end of May in 2022, but our relationship had been building throughout that whole time period. And like mid July of 2022, I got a really horrible, what I thought was urinary tract infection when I was in Bogota and I was about to be flying back to New York City for like a month. And I was going to be separated from Vincent after being together full time and traveling together for multiple months at that point. And so I got what I thought was a urinary tract infection. And I was freaked out and scared. And I usually have herbs that I work with that I know are really supportive for vaginal infections, both yeast and UTI, but particularly UTI infections. Sorry, UTI infections is kind of a repetition, unnecessary. But I was traveling, and so I didn't have those on me. And so I did the thing that I am working on no longer doing, which was I got really scared and turned to the pharmacy and was like, I need medications. And so I started taking some antibiotics, which I wish I had not done, to try to treat what I thought was an infection. And what ended up happening from this moment forward was that I got a full blown like pelvic infection that lasted over 9 months, about 9 months. And I'm not joking when I say that I did absolutely everything and anything that I could to get this under control. And I was in very, very severe pain. And I think it's also important to mention that Vincent and I's relationship was open at this point. We are not open anymore. We have very consciously chosen monogamy, but we were open. And so when I went back to New York, I was seeing other people and I was not enjoying it at all. Sleeping with other people felt really not good in my body and really sad, even though they were partners who I had already known and I was familiar with. But I was forcing my body to do something that it did not want to do, and I was not listening to myself, even though my body was like screaming at me. Like having sex with other people was extremely painful and not enjoyable, and I felt horrible doing it, even though I was very open with my partner, had communicated with him, we had agreed on all of this. Just because mentally I had like arranged this to make sense, physically, biologically, my body was like screaming, like, what are you doing? Like, you don't want to be with anyone other than this man that you're deeply in love with, that you feel very safe with, that you feel super comfortable with. What are you doing, you know? And so I know that those experiences that I had with other partners were what was continuing to trigger the pain in my body and the continuation of the infection that I had. And so for months and months and months, I was just going through this horrendous experience of pain in my womb space, in my uterus, and in my vagina. Sex became something that I just created so much pain and fear and stress and anxiety, even with Vincent. And so for a long time, we just stopped having sex for like many, many months. We just stopped having sex. And that was really sad for me. And I think that was also really important for our relationship because it forced me to really prioritize different ways to relate and connect and communicate and share and develop intimacy together that was not all based on sex. Because, as I mentioned in the previous episode, up until this point, the entirety of my sense of self, my sense of value, my sense of worth was wrapped up in my sexuality. And so, while this was a very painful part of our relationship, this was also a really important part of our relationship because this was the real work of essentially taking sex off of the table as a way to relate to one another and as a way to connect and as a way to feel close and to have to find other ways to share intimacy, essentially. But our relationship was also very rocky in this time for many reasons that I'm not going to get into because I don't think it's super important to share, but we were really going through it, is all I'm going to say about it. We were going through it. And we were like kind of broken up, but kind of still together. Like we didn't really know what we were doing. We knew that we really loved each other. We knew that this version of the relationship was not working. And we were really sad. And we were, as I said, we were going through it. So, also during this time, we could not go back to the jungle to see our teacher, Abuelo Keruin, and his wife, our teacher, Abuela Maria. We couldn't go back because the pueblo was closed due to a lot of political tension in the region. And so, if you were not indigenous, you could not go to the village at all. So for months, we were really far from the jungle and we were not working with the medicine of Jahe. We were really distant from our path with Jahe. And finally, in March of 2023, we were able to go back. And the moment that I landed in Colombia, I was waiting in Bogota for Vincent because he had to sail his boat from Panama to Colombia. So I was waiting and I went to ceremony with some other people, not with my teacher. And the first night of that ceremony was really beautiful. One of the most beautiful ceremonies I had had up until that point in my life, where I was connecting with the spirit of my future child. And it was very beautiful. The second night was maybe one of the worst ceremonies of my life because I was feeling the pain in my vagina and in my womb of this infection that nobody could diagnose and nobody could help me with after like countless doctors, countless tests, so many herbs, antibiotics, antifungals, creams, vaginal steams, like root chakra meditations, like you name it, I fucking did it for all of these 9 months, right? And finally, in this ceremony, I mean, I just cried the whole night. I was in so much pain, and I fully convinced myself that I had like ovarian cancer or cervical cancer. Like, I was convinced that I was going to have to go back to the United States and live with my parents again and go through chemotherapy and go into debt because I didn't have health insurance and la 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 la. I was spiraling. And thank God that this all happened in ceremony because the medicine of Jahe said to me, Claire, calm the fuck down. Like, you have to calm down. You have to get control of your thoughts and the reality that you are creating right now. Yes, you are in physical pain and you can do something about this. So, tomorrow morning, you wake up, you find a doctor here in Bogota, and you go and see them and you figure out what's going on. And I was like, bueno. And so the next day, I did exactly that. I found a female gynecologist in Bogota. She was really wonderful. I don't love going to medical doctors, but there is always a time and a place and a moment when they can be really helpful and really important. And this was one of those moments. So I went, we were able to do a transvaginal ultrasound, and she showed me where there were ulcers in my womb, in my uterus. There were two big ulcers. And she was like, you have to take antibiotics. And I was like, no. And she was like, no, you have to. Like, they're bad. You have to do this. This is a bad pelvic infection. Like, how did you get this infection? And I was like, I have no idea. I mean, I've been tested multiple times over the past 9 months, and no one has found anything. I've been tested for different sexually transmitted infections. I've been tested for yeast. I've been tested for bacterial vaginosis. Like, I don't know. And she was like, well, how do you not know? Like, this is a really bad infection. What could it be? And I was like, girl, you are the doctor. Like, I don't know. And she didn't know, but she was like, take these very strong antibiotics, take these probiotics after for your gut for like a month, and take these hormonal balancing, like homeopathic drops, which I did. And it took me a long time to get relief from the pain, but I did finally. And as soon as I finished with that like 2 week long protocol, I ended up back in the jungle with my teacher and with my partner. And I drank a ton of yahe, and I cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned all of the warped sexual experiences that I had been having over the past 9 months, essentially, with my partner, but also with other partners. And I just cleaned all of it. And I was like, okay, I have to make a promise to myself that this changes now. I have to stop doing this. I literally almost lost my fertility. Like, pelvic inflammatory disease, if it gets to a certain point, that's what I was diagnosed with, by the way. If it gets to a certain point, you can lose your fertility. And I was like, no, like right now, Claire, like figure this shit out seriously right now. And so I tried my best, and I was in ceremony. I think we drank like almost every single night that month that we were with our teacher, and it was hard, and I was purging, and I was cleaning, and I was crying, and I was in a lot of emotional pain, but physically my body was doing a lot better. And this was also a hard moment because Vincent and I were back together again, but our relationship was still very rocky, and he ended up breaking up with me again. And that was horrible, but that was also really important, that moment, because I had a lot of work that I needed to do on myself, and he had a lot of work that he needed to do on himself, and we really needed like a hard break in our relationship. And so as much as I absolutely hated him for it, I also really loved him for it, because he had the courage to do what I couldn't do, which was to say, this isn't working, and maybe it'll never work between us, but I love you too much to continue hurting you and to continue hurting myself. And so we separated. And I went to Ecuador, where I was drinking with this other family. And I think I'll talk about my experience with them at some point. It's not so important for this story, but I started having really bad vaginal pain again when I was with this family. Really bad. And I freaked the fuck out. I was like, oh my God, no. But like, I took all the antibiotics. Like, I drank so much yahe. Like, I'm cleaning. Like, I'm praying. Like, I'm fucking begging God to stop causing this pain in my body. Like, I've been going through this for like 10 years now, like constant infections and pain and trauma, and like feeling disgusting and dirty and like horrible in my body, in my reproductive organs, in my sexual organs. Like, please. Like, I was just begging. I was begging. And I freaked out, and I was like, I need to get more antibiotics, which is a track that I'm working really hard to unlearn, this like dependency on the medical system. I'm really a lot better now, but at the moment in time I was like, oh, I need more antibiotics. And something told me, like, chill. You know, you're going back to the jungle in like a week. You know that everything is okay. You know that this is not like, there's nothing physically wrong. You know that this is something emotional. You can get through this, but you have to calm down. You have to stay centered, and you have to work. You really have to work to figure this out. And you have to look at yourself, turn towards yourself, resource yourself. Stop looking outside of you for a medical savior. You can heal yourself with this. And so what ended up happening was I went back to the jungle. with my teacher, Abuelo Kiruin, and with his family. And the very first night that I got there, we were in ceremony with my teacher and one of his sons, who is also a very powerful healer and shaman. And I took my cup of medicine, and the first cup that I took, I was just like, okay, I just want this to be a reintroduction into the territory, into the lineage with my teacher, with his family, with this beautiful farm that I get to spend time in. I just want it to be a smooth kind of like welcome back. And that first cup was really gentle and really beautiful. And I was feeling vaginal and uterine pain. And so when it came time to take my second cup, maybe just like an hour or two later, I went up and I took my cup. Before I took my cup, I set a clear intention. And I don't always set an intention with my cup of medicine. I'm not like a big, I don't think intentions are super important a lot of the time working with Yahe. There's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not going to get into it, but this time I did. I set a really clear intention and I said, with this cup, I want to see what is going on with my womb, but I also want to see what's going on with the wombs of my family, and I want to see what's going on with the wombs of the world. What is happening to us? And I took my cup. And within, God, like 3 minutes, maybe, I knew that I was about to get my ass fucking handed to me, because very quickly I started getting memories. They were not new memories, I want to clarify. I started getting memories of myself from childhood when I was between the ages of like 6 and 8, of me sexually abusing other children. And with these memories also came the memories of me first having been sexually abused by a boy who was a few years older than me, my neighbor, actually. And again, I had always known that this had happened to me, because when I was a kid, I think I was around like 8 years old, 7 or 8, when it finally ended, because the little boy's mother, like, kind of found us and she blamed things on me. And I wasn't allowed to spend time with this boy anymore, but it had happened for a few years. It had been going on for a few years, the sexual abuse. And I had a lot of memories of it happening, and I had always said, well, it was just kids playing around, and it was just kids exploring, and kids are curious, and it wasn't that big of a deal. But I had also had memories of me sexually abusing other kids during that same time, for years, and I was really horrified and ashamed that I had done that, and I just for years like squashed it down and like refused to look at it. And so these memories were not new that were coming up, but I could not hide from them. And it was horrible seeing all of this, seeing first what had happened to me, seeing how my body felt. I was brought back to that age. I think I was 6. I'm not sure, but the first time it happened was really clear, and seeing what would happen with the memory was that I would see what was happening right before it, and then all of my vision would go black out or like white, but I would feel what was happening in my body, and I could feel myself like I couldn't breathe, and feeling really trapped in my skin, and feeling sensations and being really confused, because it partially felt really good, but I was also very scared. And I remember saying no, and I remember having a hand over my mouth and not being able to breathe, and it was this moment where I had to admit to myself that yes, it was with another child who was just a little bit older than me, but
I was sexually molested. I was abused by him because it wasn't like, it wasn't equal. I don't know how to explain that, but it wasn't exploration, it was forced. And I started, again, I said, seeing then how I processed that experience was that I did that to other children. Just a small handful, and it was one experience that I did it with other kids one time, but it was so horrifying to me that I also, the memories came really, really fast, like boom, 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 boom. And I was not prepared, and I jumped out of my hammock in the ceremonial space in the maloka, and I ran to the railing. I tried to get outside, but I couldn't. I ran to the railing and I was puking all over myself, and I was screaming, but screaming my head off, and I was just screaming, I didn't know. I didn't know. Please, God, I didn't know. Please. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. I didn't know. I didn't know. I was a child. I was just a child. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And I was puking, but I had never puked like this in my life. My God, like, I couldn't stop and I couldn't breathe, and I was screaming and I was crying and I was begging for someone to kill me. I was begging for the medicine. I was begging Yahe. I was like, fucking kill me. I can't look at this. I can't see this. I can't do this. Fucking kill me, please. Kill me, please. And, oh God. And someone came over and they gave me a limpia, they gave me a cleansing. And they calmed me down a little bit, and I turned around and I just fell to the floor. And I asked the man who had given me the limpia, I was like, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to someone. And I told him what was happening. And his response was really beautiful. He said to me, it's okay that you're seeing this now because you're ready to be seeing it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be coming up. The most important thing that you can do is forgive yourself, forgive the people who did it to you, to keep drinking medicine, to keep healing and cleaning all of this, to come to peace, to think beautiful thoughts about yourself and about all the people involved, and to just stay in your center. But it's gonna be okay. You're okay. And he said, I'm gonna give you space, but I'll be back to check on you, okay? And he left, and maybe 2 minutes later, more things started to come up, which was I started to see things from my family members who I want to be very delicate and not share too much. I'm just going to say that many, many people in my family have experienced some pretty extreme sexual abuse, both in childhood and also in their like teen and adult years. And I was seeing all of this that happened to these people that I love and that I'm connected to for many generations back. And it was just one after the other, after the other, after the other of like generations of really horrible sexual abuse. And I was seeing all of it and feeling all of it, actually, more than anything. I was feeling it in my body, I was feeling it in my cells. I was feeling it mostly like in my stomach, and I was puking and screaming and just like, when will this end? When does this end? When does the suffering of my family end? Like, please, God, stop this. And finally, I shit all over myself. Like, all of the pain and suffering and trauma that was just alive in my stomach just like released, and I just shit all over myself. And I can laugh about it now. In the moment, it was not fun, but it also wasn't that bad. It had been like my biggest fear, and a lot of people have that fear of, hearing that sometimes you can shit yourself in an ayahuasca ceremony. It was the one and only time it's happened to me. And let me just say, it really wasn't that bad. It was actually really, really incredible because all of this pain and suffering that I had felt in my body, in my stomach particularly, all of this dirtiness and disgustingness and like feeling just defiled and degraded and disrespected, all of that was in my stomach for my whole life. And I'm going to touch back on this moving forward. Just remember this. My stomach was where I held all of this literal shit, this pain, this trauma, this violence, all this sexual abuse in my stomach. And I shit my pants. And oh my God, I felt for the first time in my life covered in shit and vomit all over my face, all over my shirt, my clothes, my underwear, everything. It was the first time in my life that I felt clean. And the man who had given me the limpia, the cleaning, he came over and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I need new clothes." And he said, "What?" And I said, "I need new clothes." And he was like, "What?" And I said, "I need new underwear." And he said, "Oh, okay. I'm gonna go get a woman to help you." And he went and he found his wife, and she went off to go find me some new clothes. And I laid down on the floor of the maloca with a blanket over me. And I laid there and I calmed down and I heard the chanting of the elders, of my teacher and his son. And I got the most beautiful vision, probably of my life, like one of the top 3 most beautiful visions of my life. Because what I saw started with the boy who had molested me. And I saw who had molested him. And I saw who had molested that person, and that person, and that person. I saw all the way back. I traced the origin. And I forgave this boy with my full heart and my full soul. And I wished him peace in his body. And I wished that he could find all the healing that he needed in his own sexuality. And I prayed for all of the people in that lineage of sexual abuse that had arrived to me. And I forgave all of them. And I went through this process where I forgave every single pedophile. I forgave every single rapist. I forgave every single murderer. I forgave every single Nazi. I forgave every single slave trader. I forgave every colonizer that had ever committed an act of genocide. I forgave every horrible politician that has poisoned the water and poisoned the air and poisoned the food. I forgave everything and everyone for any violent act that had ever been committed, because I knew so deeply in my soul that no human being just wakes up one day and decides to commit violence against another living being. I saw so deeply in my soul that it is this process of years and years and years of some form of abuse that warps and shifts this person's understanding of what it means to be in right relationship with all forms of life. And so I forgave everyone and everything, including myself. And I was so at peace, and I had the biggest smile on my face. And again, covered in vomit, covered in shit, just so dirty. and I felt clean. I was finally clean. I was clean. And the woman came back and she had new clothes for me, and she took me to a private area and helped me wash off. And she gave me new clothes, and I went to the fire. And I sat there at the fire, and I was warm, and I was in my new clean clothes, and my body felt really good. And I took a deep breath, and I opened my mouth, and the most beautiful song came out, and it was the first time that I had sang where I felt like it was actually my true voice, and it was really clear, and it was really powerful, and it sounded very different from how I had sang in the past. It was as if finally clearing all of that sexual abuse, not just from myself, but from my lineage. Really, really seeing it. Just finally, someone in the family could fucking see it. Cleaning all of that was what opened me up to knowing what my real voice sounded like. And I've been singing that way ever since. And I'm grateful for that night for a lot of reasons. So the next morning, I went to go see my teacher. And he asked me how I was doing. And I was like, Abuelo, that was fucking hard. And he said to me, was that you last night? Like, puking a lot? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, and like screaming a lot? And I was like, yeah, Abuelo, that was me. And he was like, you went for a long time. You were going for like 20, 30 minutes. Like, that was a strong one. And I said, yeah, abuelo, I shit my pants. And he looked at me and he goes, oh yeah? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, you know what? And I said, what? And he goes, I almost shit myself too. And I just laughed. I was like, what? And he said, yeah, I almost shit my pants. I didn't, but I almost did. And I was like, yeah. And we laughed and we laughed and we laughed. And he was just like, bueno, Clarita, like, ahí vamos. Like, we keep going, you know? He's like, siga adelante, keep going. So, what I want to share is that in the moment, like, in any kind of, for anyone who is or is not familiar with, like, moving through altered states of consciousness where you receive these really, really intense downloads about trauma in particular, the integration process is long and difficult. And so in that ceremony, I was able to be fully at peace and to really forgive. But the next day, when I had to face everything, particularly when I had to face the fact that I had sexually abused other children when I was a child myself, it was fucking brutal. It was really, really brutal and really hard and really sad. And being, I don't like the word sober because there's a lot that goes with being sober, but being like not on medicine and having to grapple with that truth and that reality is brutal. And I continued to drink, right? So I was living with my teacher for over a year, and for months and months I started to get all of these memories from my childhood one by one, sometimes slowly, but sometimes like really intensely all at once, of other experiences of sexual abuse. And what was difficult and very painful in the moment and still sometimes is that memories like this are very tricky and very slippery and very confusing. And so there are some memories that I have that I know are absolutely true because there's other people in my life that can verify it. So, for example, what happened with me, that first memory that I got of my neighbor sexually abusing me, my mom
could verify it for me because she said to me, I remember that you guys would be playing and you would disappear for hours and we couldn't find you guys. And she had known that the boy's mother had found us like doing some sexual activity, and that's why we stopped spending time together. And so my mom was able to like verify that for me, and I knew it had happened. But I started getting memories of other experiences with other children and then also adults in my life, doctors, just experiences that I could feel in my body was so real and so true. However, it was blurry and it was confusing because a child's memory is very, I mean, memory in general is very delicate and very subjective, and it changes every time. And so that was a really painful process of getting these memories of things that had happened to me and not being sure if the face that I was seeing was the real person who had done it to me, or if my child brain was attaching those memories to other people that I had familiarity with, or maybe had fear about, or whatever. It was very hard. And even to this day, there are times when I can be so sure that I know that this person in my life did this thing to me at this point in time when we were watching this movie on the couch in their house while they were babysitting me. Like I can have very strong, clear understanding that happened. And then a day or two later, I doubt myself and I'm like, no, I must be making that up. That can't be possible. That I don't know how that could have happened. And that's also what has made it difficult in sharing with people, particularly with my family, because obviously my family wants to be supportive and they want to understand, but they understandably have questions and they have doubts because we're dealing with memories that are from like over 20 years ago at this point. And so originally I was upset because I was like, well, they don't believe me. But now I can really understand a little bit, not of their like rejection or like disbelief, but just their hesitancy to like be fully behind what I'm saying because it is tricky. And I can say that myself. It is tricky to like pinpoint, like, this is exactly what happened to me. And so while there are a handful of instances that I know absolutely did happen because I can verify it with other people in my life, there's other ones that I can't. And I question it, and that is hard, and that's scary, and that's confusing to me. For one example, my music teacher, when I was, I believe, 12 years old, I learned with my music teacher for a whole year, my voice teacher. And there were very strange things that occurred with this man in that, I was a dancer growing up and he knew I was a dancer. And I have memories of being in my music lessons, my voice lessons. And one, this man was extremely controlling and very strange just in general. But I have memories of him like kind of making me do dance stretches that were particularly kind of like sexual stretches where my legs were like wide open and I was laying in kind of sexual positions while singing, which is super weird. Just weird, right? And I have other memories of him touching parts of my body that were not necessarily like my genitalia or my breasts, but the way in which he touched me and the energy in which he touched me made me feel so scared and controlled and freaked out. And there was another situation where he brought us to the home of another boy who he taught music lessons to. And this boy had a pool in his house. He was very wealthy. And so my sister and I were there in our bathing suits, and I didn't feel good being in my bathing suit with this man. I just felt weird vibes. And I remember seeing this man be very physically affectionate with this little boy and kissing him on the lips in front of us. And weird stuff like that. And I know that that happened because my sister was with me and she remembers it. And so there's experiences like that where I'm like, something was going on. Some weird shit was going on. I still consider that sexual abuse, even though maybe there weren't outright sexual acts that occurred. Again, I don't fully remember. And so when I was getting memories of what happened with my music teacher, I was seeing that this topic of sexual abuse is really big. And it's like, just because someone might not outright like fondle or participate in penetrative sexual acts with a child doesn't mean that child sexual abuse did not occur, because there's also this degree of control. There's a degree of inappropriate sexual behavior occurring, sexual energy in the dynamic that children feel, that children are aware of, and that they feel unsafe around. So this brings me to speaking about what I said with my stomach, how I felt that my whole life I had held all of the pain in my stomach of all the sexual abuse that has occurred in my family and my lineage. So when I was 12, this whole year, I was doing voice lessons with this man, this music teacher. In the summer, that pretty quickly after like school ended, I ended up having this horrible situation with my stomach where I essentially was hospitalized for multiple weeks. And it was because my intestines had swelled up so horribly that the doctors said that it was essentially like from a 5-lane highway into a tiny little dirt path, and I couldn't even digest my own saliva. And I was screaming bloody murder multiple times a day, as my body was going through the natural process of digestion, and they could not figure it out. Even like the strongest painkillers could not help me. And I was at the point where I was just begging to die every single day, every few hours, just begging. My dad said it literally looked like an exorcism every single time he was with me in the hospital. He stayed with me night and day, night and day, night and day. And the doctors, I had like 5 specialists working on my case, and they did so many tests, and quite literally not a single one of them could figure out what was going on with me. None of them. And so they basically pulled my dad aside one day and they said, "We don't know what to tell you. This is psychosomatic." And my dad, understandably, was absolutely fucking pissed. And he was like, "Do you see what's happening to my daughter? Have you seen her go through the process of when her body's digesting and when she is screaming bloody murder, and it literally looks like a demon is inside of her? Like, you tell me that that's psychosomatic. Fucking figure this out." My dad was so angry because he was seeing his daughter in pain. And what I now know in all of the work that I have done in ceremony with Yahe is that that experience with my music teacher, on top of all of the sexual abuse that I had gone through in my younger years as a child, was essentially the catalyst to my body just being like, fuck, no. Like, all of this sexual abuse is like eating me up inside. And it was my body's way of like screaming for help, essentially. And I dealt with bad stomach issues starting when I was pretty little, but I always had horrible, horrible stomach pain. And the like peak, the culmination of this was when I was hospitalized for those weeks when I turned 13, the summer I turned 13, and almost died. And so I can look back on it and I know, like, being sexually abused as a child almost killed me. And also, all of that sexual abuse that I went through is what then kind of primed me in my teenage years to be vulnerable to re-victimization with all of the men who I had those experiences with, because I had this detachment and this numbness and this disembodiment from my body that I didn't know
what was good and what was bad for me. I didn't know what felt right and what felt wrong because I had a very long history of having been violated and swallowing that and being okay with that and not being able to identify in myself something is seriously wrong. This is not good for me and I'm going to do something to stop it. And so this process was like just fucking horrible. Like, I wouldn't wish this on anyone, even my worst enemy. I don't have enemies in life, but if I did have like a worst enemy nemesis, I would not even wish this on them because this was fucking horrible going through all of this shit and seeing not only how like my experiences in my childhoods had set me up for this, but going through my family's lineage and going through all of the sexual pain and trauma that is alive still in my cells of people who have suffered and who are still suffering, who have never been able to tell their story, who have swallowed all of this sexual violence. That has been both horrifying and horrendous. And there were days where I truly did not think that I could continue on, like in life, seeing all of this. And also so important and beautiful because I knew very clearly that I was seeing all of this because it was finally time for someone in my family to know, and for someone in my family to understand, and for someone in my family to be able to do the work of forgiveness for every single person involved so that I could start the process of healing and freeing my lineage from the chains of child sexual abuse. All of the illness that my family has gone through, all of the profound physical pain and suffering, so much illness, all of it coming back to child sexual abuse. Like the vast majority of it coming back to that violation of the sacredness of a child being stolen in that moment. Another painful but beautiful part of this process was that every single fucking thing in my life finally made sense. I finally understood why I had been so sick throughout my entire childhood, why I was always in and out of doctor's offices with different pains and different illnesses and blah, blah, blah. I finally understood, as I said, how I ended up being sexually assaulted those multiple times when I was a teenager. I finally understood how I had ended up in an abusive relationship for as long as I was. I finally understood why I was struggling so much with substance abuse in my late teens, I would say. In my teens, I was also participating in substance abuse, but it got really bad in my early 20s. I finally understood all of my confusion with my gender and being really attached to a non-binary gender and hating womanhood, hating my body. I finally understood all of my vaginal infections. I finally understood why I had such a tough relationship with my family. And to be clear, I want to say something very clear. Nobody in my blood family ever sexually abused me. However, I in my deep psyche, I did have anger and I did have a lot of hatred for my parents for not keeping me safe, even though, also to be very clear, I do not blame my parents. My parents did the absolute best that they could to keep me safe as a child, and none of this is their fault. My parents are incredible, but for a long time, I unknowingly really, really hated my parents because I felt so unsafe just in general. And I've done a lot of work to come into a good relationship with my mother and my father, because they're incredible people. But I finally understood why my relationship with them was so hard. And I also finally understood why my relationship with sex was the way that it was. And the fact of the matter was, in all of my very misguided exploration, so-called exploration, I would now refer to it as experiences of re-victimization, willingly re-victimizing myself. I know now that the reason that I was doing all of that was because I was trying to understand what was so special about sex that another person would take it from me, that another person would violate me sexually. What was it about sex that was so important? And that's why I had gone through that process of exploring and trying to learn everything that I possibly could about sex and getting really, really obsessed with it and having all of the experiences that I did. I was desperate to figure out why this thing is so important, so valuable, that anyone would steal it from another person, take it by force. And so that was helpful, really, really helpful and really healing to understand my motivations behind everything, because as I said in the previous episode, like when I was in this loop of all of this sexual re-victimization and I could not stop myself, like I couldn't understand why. I knew that I was in pain. I knew that I was hurting myself. I knew that I was suffering, but I couldn't understand why I was doing it. And so this helped me in that. And then finally, well, two final things was that one, I understood why my relationship with Vincent was suffering so badly, particularly in our sexual dynamic, but all aspects of the relationship. And the second thing was I understood why, when I was kind of in my mid 20s, I had decided that I didn't want to have children. And the reason for that, the real reason, there's multiple reasons. One, as I've mentioned before, I was very attached to a non-binary identity. I was very attached to detached to womanhood, detached from womanhood. I was very terrified to be in a monogamous relationship, to be in a heterosexual relationship, to even live with a partner. Like I was dealing with all of that. But the real, true reason why I didn't want to have kids was because deep down, I was terrified that my children would be sexually abused like I was. Even though I didn't really know it, but I did know it because I knew what had happened to me. That was why I didn't want to have kids. And when I think about it now, I'm just so grateful that I found the path of Yahe, and I'm so grateful that I found my late and beloved teachers, Abuelo Kerwin and Abuela Maria, because if you've listened to the episodes that I've done about Abuelo and Abuela, you know that everything that they did was for their family, and that they cared for me as if I was their family, even though I was not blood related to them, obviously. Everything that they did was for the family. And they helped me realign with the understanding that the purpose of life is to care for our families and our communities and create and dream and vision a better world for 7 generations to come. It's not even just about my kids or my grandkids or my great grandkids, but 7 generations to come. And I also understood very deeply in my time with Abuelo and Abuela that when we heal something huge like this, and also something small, but whenever we heal something like this, like a generational curse like this, we heal it for 7 generations forward, but also for 7 generations back. And so, in all of this, I can say that, again, this was fucking horrible to go throughout my life, to experience, and fucking horrible to have to go back through in ceremony and see all of it over and over and over and over again for like hundreds of ceremonies to see all of this. And also, I am so grateful, and I'm so fucking proud of myself for being able to do this work for myself, for my ancestors, and for my future descendants. There is nothing in my life that I have done that has been more important than healing this and seeing this. And I want to be really clear when I say I do not see myself as fully healed. I don't think that fully healing from something like this is possible, and I do think that it's something that takes multiple generations to clean and to release and to come back into right relationship with God and with healthy sexuality. However, when I say that these days I'm so much more at peace with my body and with my heart and with my experience of sexuality now, I'm very grateful for the impact that this has had on my relationship with my partner Vincent. We've really, really healed in many, 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 many ways. And we're in such a good place now. And it all started because I was able to see all of this, the impact that this understanding and realization that had on our relationship is indescribable. And so I'm not even going to try to like put it into words, but this was really kind of the missing key for us in understanding why we were in so much pain in our partnership. And we're in a very good place now. And I'm also finally at the point where I know that even with everything that I've been through in my body, that I will be capable of creating and birthing and nurturing life, the lives of my children, and that they will be safe. And that even if, God forbid, something does happen to them like this, they will be okay, because this is what happened to me, and I still have a beautiful life. I am so grateful for my life. I am so grateful for my path. I'm so grateful for my family. I'm so grateful for all of the gifts that my ancestors have offered to me. I'm so grateful for my teachers. I'm so grateful for the work that I get to do in this life. I'm so grateful for my partnership. I am so blessed. And so often when I share this part of my story with people about the abuse that I've been through, people's initial response is understandable. It's, I'm so sorry that you went through that. And the way I always respond is, thank you. I appreciate that, but I wouldn't change it for the world. This is what I had to go through in this life. And I'm at peace with all of it, because I have forgiven everyone who has treated my body with disrespect, and I have forgiven myself for doing the same to so many people. And so I, again, as I said, I would not wish this on anyone. And also, I wouldn't change my path for anything. So, whoosh. I know that this is a lot. This is intense to take on. It's intense to share. I thank you guys so much for sticking with me through it, for listening, for holding space for it. I know that this is probably going to ripple out and have a big impact, which is why I've felt nervous to share this part of my story this intimately and this in depth. But I also know that it's really important to give voice to this. I thank my ancestors for offering me the strength and the courage and the guidance to share this part of my story with you all. I'm praying for all of your bodies, your wombs, all of your sexual organs, all of your hearts. I'm praying for all of your lineages and your families. And I'm praying especially for all of the young children that you are all connected to. There is nothing and no one more sacred and more worthy of our protection and care and love than a child. Children are the seeds of the future. They are our hope. Children need to be protected at all costs. When I think about my whole process, and particularly the part of my process of understanding my blocks around wanting to become a mother, not wanting to become a mother. The way that I look at it now, and I drew something about a year ago, over a year ago, that I think I'll share on the Patreon. I think of my body as a garden that for a very long time has not been watered or tended to, that many people have come through and that they have done their best to destroy, that they have defiled and degraded and disrespected the land, that they have done everything in their power to squash out any fertile signs of life. But as a woman, I know that my body also carries the seeds of the future. And I know that in tending to my garden, tending to the land and the fertile soil of my womb and my heart, knowing that through all of this, I am still more than capable of being able to carry the seeds of the future into this life. Nothing and no one can take that from me. My body is the garden. My children are the seeds. They are the flowers. They are the hope. And they are the future. And not just my future children, but all of our children and all of the children to come. There is nothing more sacred than a child. So I'll close by just sending a prayer of protection to every single child on this earth and every child to come. Sending all of my prayers and blessings to all the wombs of the world that will carry children, that may be carrying children currently, particularly the wombs that have experienced their own instances of sexual abuse. Also praying for all of the men who will become fathers, the men who have gone through their experiences of sexual abuse, praying for their bodies, praying for their sexual organs, praying for their hearts, praying for their ability to heal, to come into right relationship with their sense of healthy sexuality, so that the seed that they pass on to the mother of their children can be one of pure love and kindness and respect, that the child that is created between future mothers and future fathers is a child that comes into this life knowing love, knowing care, knowing support, knowing kindness, knowing healthy attachment, and a child that is raised as a child of God, a child of the Creator, a divine child of the universe, because children are the hope. Thank you guys.
All right, so to close, as always, I'll share about the Patreon episode. So I decided to record an extra extended episode about what it means to give weight back to sexuality and what it means to value it really differently, and to kind of share a little bit about my process of unlearning the casualness of sex and hookup culture and a lot of the norms that we have all taken on in our modern culture, and to kind of come back to understanding what sacredness means when we're talking about the body, when we're talking about opening up our bodies to other people. It's something that I feel was really missing in my sexual education, and it's something that I've had to relearn for myself. And so I share a little bit about that. That's over on Patreon for any subscribers. Thank you so much to the people who subscribe. Your support really means a lot. And yeah, we'll see what comes in future episodes. Thank you guys.
Mm-hmm.